Right or right.
In different senses, and he refuses to acknowledge that one God in three persons is not not saying that one is equal to three. It's not it. It's
Yeah, well, I
so
think
he refuses to say.
what he would want to understand is when you say that God is three persons, what the is there. Because in the case of the bag with the three apples, right, you're you're talking about three parts of one object, presumably, or something like
Yeah.
that, right? Or some kind of containment relation, right? And so, if that's not what you mean when you say God is three persons, God is a container that has three things in it, he's going to want to understand what that relation is if it's not some kind of contradictory assertion.
Well, the thing is, I tried a more competent, advanced explanation. He didn't get it. So I went down to a more base explanation. And this is now what you guys are focusing on. I'm trying to tell you is that God is one being in three distinct simultaneous persons. I mentioned the inseparable operations issue, the aseity, and the perichoretic relationship. I can get advanced if you guys are open to that. I can teach you what it is, what the Trinity is, so that you don't stick with a bag with three apples and use that. If that's the level of understanding that you have, then that tells me you're not understanding the
So
issue.
I think so. Jack asked something which does pique my curiosity to continue the conversation, if you don't mind. So when you want to say something like Jesus is God, is that an is of predication or an is of identity or some other
Both.
kind of is?
Both.
Well, I take predication to be like a synthetic relation and identity to be an analytic identity. So it's a contradiction in the way I understand the terms.
Do you understand the Christian doctrine of the person of Christ?
No, feel free to elaborate.
Familiar with the hypostatic union?
No, feel free to explain to me what it means for an is to be both analytic and synthetic, or
Um,
just predicate and identity.
so here we go. So God, excuse me, Jesus is one person with two distinct natures, is a divine nature and a human nature. This is called the hypostatic union. And the attributes of both natures are ascribed to the single person. This is called the communicatio idiomatum. That's just the
And I think this is kind of getting off track because I think if he had asked you when you say God is Yahweh, what kind of uh, relation is does the is um, uh, what's being expressed by the is, what relation is being expressed by the is when God is Yahweh, you wouldn't be bringing up the hypostatic union there, right? That's just like an additional complication. He's just trying to understand
softly.
between what the relationship is between God and the individual members of the Trinity.
Well, it's like Matt, if you're trying to talk, you're like we heard like two words. It sounds like maybe you were cutting out, so I don't think someone's over talking you.
No, I couldn't understand him. He was speaking softly.
Oh, sorry, I'll say it louder. So I think it's kind of like I think Orson sort of made a mistake by asking about Jesus because that's just going to bring in an additional complication about the second person having two natures and so on, right? So he could have asked the same question when you say God is Yahweh or Yahweh is God, right? What is the is? What relation is the is expressing there? Because then the hypostatic union wouldn't be relevant to that, right? But there'd still be this question: if it's not a parthood relation, right? What kind of relation is being expressed by the is?
Well, I'm not
So
sure
I
how
think
to
it'd
answer
probably
your
be
question.
better, huh?
I'm not sure how to answer your question.
Okay, well, I mean, that's the question on the table. I mean, if you don't have an answer, that's fine. I'm just saying that I think that's kind of like
So in the
Orson. You
case Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, Jack. So in the case of Jesus, it's both identity and predicate, but in the case of God, you don't know what that is means.
In the case of Yahweh,
Yeah, God and Yahweh.
Yeah, so when you say, you ask the question, what does the is mean? I'm not even sure what you mean by that, because there are different ways we can get into this. What we're talking about here is what the revelation of Scripture teaches about the person of Christ, that within his personhood, he has two distinct natures.
Sorry, I was just
So that's why
asking. I don't think it's a difficult question. I was asking what is means.
I'm not how to answer the question.
Well, it's just that the term, the word is, right, expresses a variety of different relations, right? Sometimes it expresses an identity, right? So if we say Superman is Clark Kent, right, that's going to be some kind of identity relation. And maybe there are different types of identities, like there could be analytic or synthetic identities. We don't have to get into that. But that's going to be one way you can use the word is, right? But
And
sometimes you use
then
the word
predication
it.
is going to be the ball is red.
Yeah, sometimes it's predication. But there's also the is of subsumption, which is maybe, like a member of a class. So if we say a dog is a mammal, we'll say um, uh, that's the is of subsumption because the dog is a member of a class. Just trying to think. I think there's yeah. I think those are probably the
But that
main.
like
I feel like I'm
highlights what's being asked. Like, is it one of those or is it something else? When you
right.
say
Exactly.
Yahweh is God. You're not coming through if you're saying anything.
You talking to?
Yeah, we were asking, like Jack spent a moment to highlight the question, like what the question's burden is.
I'm not sure, like I said, how to respond about the question about the nature of the word is.
But then
And I suspect that no matter,
if you don't know what it means, then why do you use it?
and as I was going to say, whichever form of it I want to use, what'll happen is you guys will just question that, and then we don't get anywhere.
Of course,
When we
yeah,
say
of
when
course we're
we
gonna
say,
question it, but you
can I?
should, like I
Okay,
said, it seems almost ridiculous without being rude. You did say that I need to be educated earlier, so it's fine for me to say that in
I'm
my
not.
opinion.
I'm not trying to
It's
give you a hard time, Matt. I was just sort of explaining. I was sort of like trying to put just sort of clarify a few points and put the discussion on a better
I see.
track.
But I do want to give you a little bit of a hard time because I am saying that I do think it's a bit ridiculous to like assert this proposition where Yahweh is God, but then not know what is means. It seems like if you don't know what the is means, then you need to redact the proposition.
so if I speak, is my question, or are you going to let me finish my sentences? Or are you going to continue to interrupt?
I did interject, but I'll let you finish this time.
I just want to have a conversation,
Yeah,
and
I
when I
think
ask
interjection
questions,
is part of a conversation.
Austin, if you want to keep the conversation going, you can't interrupt Matt. He's just going to leave.
Okay, but I do think I've been very soft.
You. It's just a couple of minutes. You
But
started.
like right there, you interrupt him like 4 times, like
Yeah.
4 times in a row.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
Going to leave.
okay, it's my bad. And yeah, Matt, if you do want to continue, I am literally going to stay muted until you finish whatever you say this time.
well, I don't mind an interruption periodically, but when I've even said, let me finish, and then as I'm speaking it, you interrupt again. Uh, It's a problem. A lot of people don't mind that. I do, and after a while, I just give up. So I just polite conversation. So what I could do is ask you, and maybe I could ask Angstreich, what are the different forms of is? You said is of subsumption. What are some other ones?
The is of identity and
Okay.
the is of predication. Those three would probably be the main ones that would be relevant to this. Sometimes we use is in other ways, like we say there is a dog. That's sometimes called an existential is, but I don't think that's the kind of thing you have in mind. We're talking about a relation. So, like, I think those are the three main types of ways is used as a marker of a relation.
So in the is of identity, what we're saying then is, I'm just going to take my notes here, all right, make sure that I'm getting this right so I can try and answer your questions properly. So the is of identity is more or less a correspondence between one thing and another, right?
That sounds basically right.
So would you say that the is of identity deals with the law of identity, A equals A?
Yes,
Okay. All right. And predication deals with um, characteristics assigned to it. The apple is red,
that's correct.
okay, or properties. All right. And then subsumption, which I did not know that word until you spoke it, telling me that, is a member of a class.
That's right.
So when we say Yahweh is God, we only have three ises to work with, right?
Well, I mean, you could mean something else. Then you'd have to tell us what you have in mind. Just not sure um, what else to propose. That's like um,
Well,
part of
we have
common use. Or
is of subsumption, is of identity, is of predication. What else is there? Is of what?
there's something called is of agreement, but I'm trying to remember what
Isn't
that
there is of
is.
existence?
Yeah, there's the existential is, but that's not really expressing a relation, so I don't think that's going to be relevant.
No, yeah, I agree.
Um, Something called is of agreement. I gotta look up what that is, though. I forgot.
Okay, that'd be interesting. I'll put in my notes. And so, all right, so when we say Jesus is God, we would say that this is both, or I would lean towards the idea that it's both identity and predication. That it's a statement claiming his nature and essence is that, but also distinguishing from his human nature, having a quality and property of his divine. Uh, just like the statement God is a Trinity is both identity and predication. Right? Would you agree?
Well, it would have to be explored. I mean, but Orson, this is probably where you come in.
Sorry,
Sorry, I didn't understand the last type statement. What?
sorry, I didn't listen to the response as to what the is actually
Oh
is.
my gosh, Orson.
Well, he was
Well,
saying,
he
I think.
changed to Jack, so I mean, I was
No, no. I
there
want
with
you
the
to. I
burden.
want you to pursue this, Orson, because I have to take a shower. But he's and I apologize, Matt, if that means maybe you could repeat what you said. But he's saying he's saying something like that. There's both an identity and a predication relation being asserted there. But I think you're going to have to draw him out because I can't. I have to step away
Well,
for a few minutes.
that again leads, if that's what you are saying, Matt, that again leads me to the issue of like, I don't understand what it means for an analytic relation to also be a synthetic one. Like, in the sense of when we predicate something onto something, when it's not analytic, is because what we predicate upon it is not the subject
Well,
that's
wait,
being
just
predicated upon.
before you continue, Orson,
Yeah.
he hasn't actually said anything about that specifically because you could have a synthetic and an analytic identity, right? Well, I mean, you could have one or the other. right? And we haven't actually asked him if the identity was synthetic or analytic. All I heard him say was that it seems like, well, I mean, I think we need to draw it out, but he seemed to be saying that there was some kind of identity being asserted between God and each member of the Trinity. So God is identical. When you say the Father is God, you're saying the Father is identical to God, but that's not the only thing that is being expressed in that statement. There's also a predication of some kind being expressed. So we didn't really get into analyticity or
Well,
synthetic.
that's what I'm saying is like, I don't know if something is analytic to something, I don't know what it means to predicate upon
Yeah, but he didn't
the
say whether the
subject.
identity was analytic or not. That would be another question you'd have to ask.
Okay.
I'm just saying all he said was that there's an identity relation and a predication relation being expressed there.
But then if it's a synthetic identity, are we moving into like the idea of like senses? So they're gonna like
Well,
co-refer.
I don't know if it's a synthetic identity or not. I haven't asked him that. I'm just saying you can't sort of you can't object to the fact that he's like made some kind of synthetic claim. For
Well, it
example,
just seems like there's a problem on both sides. If it's analytic, then it doesn't make sense to say it's predicated.
I mean,
Unless you're
you
saying
can
that.
have analytic and synthetic predications too, right?
Yeah, but if it's synthetic, then it's going to co-refer, if
That's
I
right.
recall that correctly. But then we don't really get out. So on both sides of that answer, we're not getting out of the issue of like these just being senses of God, and then merely senses of God, or there is only one God and not three. There is no triune nature.
You
I'm not
guys
sure I
define,
follow.
sorry,
No, go ahead, Matt. It's okay.
could you define analytic relation?
Sorry, an analytic proposition is just one that's true in virtue of the meanings of the words. So the idea is going to be that if we say a bachelor is unmarried, right? That's just true because the meaning of bachelor um, is an unmarried male, right?
So
So that
in
means it's an analytic truth, right? And that's going to
to
be
go on, sorry.
sorry.
I was just going to
That's
say
going
to like to explicate that would be like if you were so if we take like a bachelor and unmarried, then we were to say the bachelor is unmarried. That would be an analytic relation because no extra information is added because all of the contents of bachelor is contained in the unmarried man.
yeah, and you can contrast that with something like uh, my mother has blonde hair, right? It's not part of the meaning of the expression my mother that she has blonde hair in the way that it's part of the meaning of bachelor that a bachelor is unmarried. Um, and so that's a synthetic proposition because you're sort of adding information that's not contained in the meaning of the term that you're predicating of.
You can also think of it in terms of like set theory. Like if you were to say blonde women would be a subset of women, so that would be synthetic, whereas analytic would be both terms on either side of the is are the same size of set or extension.
So analytic proposition is just true with the virtue, the meaning of the words. Bachelor's unmarried. And synthetic proposition is just adding information. So the bachelor is blonde.
That's
That's
right.
right.
Right?
And it's true in virtue of, you might think of it as being true, and it's not true in virtue of the meaning of the words, it's true in virtue of some fact in the world, right? What's sometimes called a worldly fact, right? There's some worldly fact that makes it true.
So isn't analytic proposition dealing with the is of identity?
I
Well,
would
no,
say so.
you can have analytic predications, right? So if I say if I say the bachelor is an unmarried male, that's an analytic identity, right? If I say the bachelor is unmarried, that's an analytic predication. And similarly, you could have synthetic identities and synthetic predications. So Superman is Clark Kent is presumably a synthetic identity, because it's not built into the meaning of those names that they are the same person. They do pick out the same person, but that's a worldly fact. It's not a fact about the meaning of the names. And similarly, if I say Superman can fly, that's a synthetic predication about Superman. It's not built into the meaning of the name Superman that he can fly, presumably. So you can have synthetic predications and synthetic identities, and analytic identities and analytic predications.
So now what?
Well, Orson, you're going to have
Well,
to pick it up.
my burden again would be like, if you don't know what the is means, then I think you should redact the proposition.
So I should never use the word is again?
I think you should use it if you can, as in, like, if you're going to do like philosophical debate where you're trying to say that your worldview is superior. I think you should understand what is means when you use it.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
Orson, before you get to that, he did say that he thinks there's an identity between the Father and God, and that when you say God is the Father, that there's some kind of predication relation as well. So you might want
Right.
to try to draw that out before you just sort of try to shut down the claim.
But, well, that is a fine way to go about it, but also I think it's also fine to say, like, it's an open question for Matt, and if he is
Yeah,
empty-handed,
but
then
you should ask him what he thinks. You should ask him about the nature of the identities and what he thinks is being predicated. You know, try to explore what he thinks is being expressed before you just sort of shut the.
so yeah, Matt, do you understand if I was to say, like, what is being predicated upon God when we say God is Yahweh?
What his attributes are, properties that we ascribe.
Is there extra properties of God that's being predicated onto Yahweh?
Yahweh is God.
So they contain the same properties.
Yahweh is by definition God. God is by definition Yahweh. It's an analytic proposition, right? Dealing with the is of identity, right?
So this may be a little bit of confusion for me. I thought Jack was saying Yahweh to highlight, like, the Father is God.
Well, the Father is one of the persons that exists in God.
So when you predicate the Father onto God, is any extra information being added?
Information. Yeah, we'd say God is a Trinity, is stating the is of identity there. But we also say that God is a Trinity is predication, because we're identifying him, one, with the nature of the triune being, but also saying that the properties or the attributes, which I don't really like to use those words in that sense, deals with the nature of his existence in a triune being. So there's both identity and predication, aspects of them both.
Right, but that predication, is it, if it's an analytic predication, then the predication just reduces to identity.
Well, that's what we say. God is one and the same as his triune nature.
But then you'd be affirming that the Father being God is an analytic identity.
No, we would say that the Father is God, is that the word God then takes on the meaning of the divine, I don't know how to say this, the divine nature of God.
But then that sounds like there's some sort of separation between the three notions of God there. Like if God takes on a different meaning when you refer to Father as opposed to the Holy Spirit.
I'm trying to remember something now. Something just popped in my mind. The third category, identity, predication, and something else. Crud. What?
Subsumption, and then Jovan said existence.
No, no. Oh, I hate it when that happens.
See, the issue is going to boil down to is like
There's
when
another.
you're asserting like God is one and God is three, you're gonna have like the issue of like when you say is, you're gonna be asserting that there's like a distinction between them and an identity at the same time. Which is why if you're gonna say it's a synthetic predication, that's where the distinction is gonna lie. Whereas like if it's an analytic predication, then there's no distinction. But because you want to say that they're one and three at the same time, you're going to run into doing both of those at the same time, I feel.
No. I think you're confusing numeric identity with identity of predication and trying to distinguish and separate the attributes of God from his own nature and his own essence. God exists as one being, but the one being is called divine simplicity. The one nature of God is the one thing. But within that one being is three distinct persons. So this is why I would say it's both identity and predication, because there's elements of both in the statement God is a Trinity. So I'm not really sure how much further to go than that.
But that would mean it's a synthetic relation between the Father and God if the persons are distinct.
Well, there is a synthetic relationship there, but also this is the problem. I'm not saying problem with you. I'm just saying the problem is trying to articulate the very nature of God, who reveals himself as one being, who exists perichoretically as three distinct simultaneous persons in the divine, single divine essence. I don't know how to express it or explain the machinations of God's essence and nature that way. I can only go as deep as what the scriptures say, and that's about as deep as I can go.
Right, well, think of it this way. Let me ask you again, because I believe you affirmed. So are we going to say the Father has an analytic identity to God?
I'm not sure you mean by analytic identity at this point. If you're just
As in
saying
there's...
that that the Father is one and the same as God, then that would not be correct, because God is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And to say the Father is equal to that would be a non sequitur.
But then that is the is of predication. So there are three distinct two distinct categories between the Father and God, like you just said.
Because the Father is God, but God has one sense of the divine nature and essence, but it also has another sense in that it is triune. So we say the Father is God, and this is where I can't articulate it. I've thought about this before, how to say it. The Father is God. The analogy I use is with time. Time is past, present, and future. And so the past is time. So what sense are we saying the past is time when we also say time is past, present, and future? We can't say it's identity, strictly one-to-one correspondence there, because it doesn't make sense. So there's a different sense in which we have to understand the word is of time as it relates to the whole. That's what I don't know the proper phraseology is for that in philosophy. Is it identity, or is it subsumption, identically existent agreement? I just don't know.
Well, time is a bit of a sticky one, but I mean, I would like say like time is like a set, and then we're gonna like pick out time indexes from that set, and the indexes are going to be particulars. And it seems like you're going to want to say that the particular here being like the Father is also like the larger category, like the set, because of some divine unification which tries to sidestep that problem.
Well, I'm just not sure how to answer the question, because you're asking me essentially to understand the very nature of God and the relation of the
Right, but
persons to the divine essence.
this is the burden you put on me earlier, which was you were asking me, you were telling me that I fell short because I didn't have like a large explanation or mechanistic explanation of the nature of the relationship between the Platonic objects such that they're unified.
Yeah, Orson, we wouldn't call a particular in the universe, so it's going to be disanalogous with what he's saying.
You were a little quiet and fuzzy.
I'm saying we wouldn't call a particular in the universe. So there seems to be a disanalogy between the Trinity
Yeah,
and what he's
that's why I
saying.
said he wants to appeal to some notion of divine unification between like the three separate parts becoming like one part. But then if he can't explain the relation, then he falls to the same burden that he placed on me earlier.
The reason I remain silent is because you just begun your interruption.
Yeah, I did interrupt you a little, but you were very close to the end, it seemed, of your statement.
How would you know if I hadn't finished yet?
Well, you were on the end of your second clause of the sentence.
Say, oops, okay, we'll move on.
I'll apologize if it upsets you, Matt. I'll try
No.
not to interrupt you more.
So I'm remembering now what it was. It was the is of predication in the strong sense and the weak sense. And it's been a while since I've gone over it, so I'm going to have to refresh my memory on this before I continue with that, because the issue here I think is an interesting one. I'm taking notes from what you guys are saying because you guys always help me learn more about what I believe is the truth. And you don't realize it. But anyway, the is of subsumption, identity, predication, agreement, is of existence, analytic proposition, synthetic proposition. And I need to work on the predication in strong and weak senses. And so I'm going to do that.
Yeah, good chat.
Matt, I think,
But also, go ahead.
well, when you say the Father is God, it's both is a predication and identity. I think that can be reduced down to, it's easy to understand if you just phrase it as it's two separate propositions. One of them is and is of identity. So when you say Jesus is God or Father is God, you're saying that there is this person, the Father, and he has this property of godness, and that's the first proposition. And then also, in addition to some other proposition, which is that there is this person, the Father, who is God, which is like another person or a thing or an entity. Isn't that like a good way to understand it? That you're saying two propositions?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that's why I say both identity and predication.
Okay,
Yeah, so for
then yeah.
example, for this example, the statement, God is a Trinity, is a statement of identity because it's identifying God with the Trinity as one and the same thing. But it's also predication because it's showing that God has certain qualities and characteristics or properties as a triune thing. This is how so that's why I say it's both identity and predication. It can be understood either way. See?
Well, the predication
So
one, it seems like it's going to say something like Father has this property of being God. He has the godness property.
yes, yes, and this yeah, this is the place or the wall which I've hit in that I'm not sure how to explain it any further than that. And I don't know if it's valid to ask the questions to explain God beyond what he has revealed. He is not subject merely to our intellectual machinations. He reveals himself, like for example, in the person of Christ in the hypostatic union. How is it possible that one person could have two distinct natures? I don't know. And I say this to people. I said, I don't know how that works. Well, because I don't know how it works doesn't mean it can't be true. It just means I can't explain it. And likewise with God being a triune being, I don't know how it works, and I can't explain how it works, but this is the self-revelation of God. And so I work from that the best I can. And what a lot of you guys do is want me to explain exactly how the relationship works. And certainly is possible that I don't understand your terminology sufficiently to answer you competently. But I do try and learn. I do take notes of what it is you guys say, and you help me a great deal in that respect. And then I find that my explanations are even more refined and even better. So I'm just saying, I appreciate it. So when we say, for example, that God is a triune being, or that he has the quality of three persons, then this seems to be is by a predication. Would you agree?
So you're talking to me?
Yeah, because I'm sorry,
Can
yes.
you repeat the last thing you said?
It would seem to be that to say that God is three persons, God is a Trinity, let's just say that. Well, I think we're just going over stuff we've already said. Has the quality of being both identity and predication. Would you agree that that's the case?
Well, I'll have to explore that further, but I was just trying to make sense of what you're saying. I was just trying to make sense when you say something like the Father is God, and and is a predication and identity. I was just thinking that those are you're expressing two separate propositions. I don't know. I would have to think about what that means further. I
Okay,
was just
well,
giving like a way to interpret that idea.
yeah, I appreciate that, and I was just trying to work off of that, not trying to challenge you or anything, but just to expand and work with it, because I do believe that the statement God is a Trinity or a triune being, I think is a better way to put it, is both identity and predication, because it shows the identity of God with the triunity, but also the triunity itself is characteristic of his nature. And so I think a problem might exist in trying to separate them. In that the Bible, they're not separated, even though we do say ontological Trinity, economic Trinity, perichoretic relationship, um, and things like that. So
I go hard in the paint, yeah, homie, I'm a saint.